5 books of the Old Testament, but they don't hear anything else. That's a fact. They follow a liturgical calendar. Like maybe the first Sabbath of the new year, they might read Genesis 1 through Genesis 3. That's what they're going to hear in church, and that rabbi will preach on that. And then the second week, it might be 2 to 4. But they read all 5 of the first books of the Old Testament, but that's all that they read. I remember talking to a Jewish guy and I said, have you ever read this book? Malachi. He didn't even know how to pronounce it.
Right.
I mean, you laugh at that, but that's the God's honest truth. And I think
So
it's a
they
shame.
never get out of the first 5 books?
First
Huh?
5 books is there, it's all she wrote.
That's all they concentrate on is those first
They don't
5
even get
books.
into King David and stuff, then does it? Is he?
Oh. If you go through Genesis, you're going to find out about King David. You in the Old Testament, you will find
Okay,
out
I'm
about
talking about
that.
get into
You'll
the
go up
Psalms
through
and Proverbs
Moses,
and that
okay?
kind of
My,
stuff.
my point is, they don't go beyond it. And I'll say something else. Again, if you read that quote in Deuteronomy, it says, impress them upon your children. Their kids are taught, you can't become a Christian. Man, that's a sin. It's ungodly to them.
Total blasphemy.
How many here are Roman Catholic in background?
Go ahead.
Anybody here? Well, when you were a kid growing up, what would happen if you didn't go to confession?
No choice, man. We were drug up in it.
I mean,
Man, but
they taught certain things, but
Such
you don't
a-
go to confession, you're doomed to hell. And they wind up scared of it, which is a shame. But anyhow, that's not what I wanted to get to. I am going to get to what I think is important. All right, I got to put my glasses on so I can read my notes. First of all, let me explain to you why I'm leaving tonight. Michael called me on the 29th of December. He was upset because he had to see me in church. The Sunday before, I was sick as a dog. I had a runny nose, I was coughing, I was sneezing, and my wife says to me, you go to church and contaminate everybody and I'll kill you. So I didn't go to church. This is the Sunday just before Christmas. The Sunday after Christmas, I did go. But he didn't see me. I saw him, he was directing traffic. He calls me up later in the afternoon and he says, are you alive? I said, yeah, I'm alive. Why did you think I was dead? I said, I know you talked to my wife to get my number. And he said, I just want to make sure you were okay. And I told him that I had been sick. And I said, okay, Michael, give me a preview. What are we going to talk about next Tuesday night? And he says, I don't know. He said to me, I'm either think we're going to do Luke, or maybe we'll do something on this guy called Melchizedek. Remember that, Michael? And he said, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, the king of righteousness. Anyhow, we had a discussion for about 2 minutes, and the next thing I know, he said to me, good, you're leading the discussion.
That's really why
He just offloaded this to me,
He's a
and
crap
after I
young
hung
man,
up the
don't
phone, I said to myself, you idiot! Why did you volunteer to do this?
Yeah.
Now, I gotta tell everybody, I don't mind standing up in front of a group. In fact, I shared it with Kenny coming down here. I did an entire 40-week long Bible study just on Abraham. You know what it's like to spend 40 weeks talking about Abraham? And we didn't have enough time to talk about Abraham. In this group, there's really different ways to do Bible studies. You can do it like Cliff and this guy so eloquently do it book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, or word by word. You could also do a study on subjects like love, forgiveness, sin. You can also do character studies. Well, I've done all of them in my life. Believe me, I have. So when we started to talk about Melchizedek, immediately into my mind pops Abraham. Now you need to know, I did that study in 1994 in Valley Presbyterian Church in Brookfield, Connecticut. But I'm a pack rat. I have all of my notes. I have notes from 45 years ago. All right? So my wife says to me, you're not going to have any problem. Just go pull out your notes and take it from that. Well, I'm going to pass this out. Just pass one and take one. There's plenty of those too. I decided Says, we're gonna do Melchizedek, and you need to know he appears in 3 different places in the Bible. In the Old Testament, he's twice. He's found in the book of Genesis, and he's found in the book of Psalms. And then in the New Testament, there's almost an entire chapter in Hebrew about it, or at least it's mentioned. So I decided to go take the exact scripture quotes and type them up so we all have the same basis. Now, I use the NIV. If you guys prefer the New King James, I don't care what you use as far as the Bible is concerned. But I use the NIV, all right? And as I was thinking about it more and more, I really started to understand that I gotta explain some basic things about Judaism to you guys. Because again, I figure nobody here knows it. Right? I hate to say it, but you're all goyish up. Right? You know what a goyim is, by the way? You may hear, if you hear a Jew say that, be insulted. Because a goyim means easily led like a cow. And you can lead a cow anywhere, all right? Okay, goyish up means you're a cowhead. Don't, all right? And I'm proud to say I'm a goyim. I'm not ashamed of it, okay? Especially when I go to Jews and I know more about their Bible than they do. And I don't talk the New Testament, I talk the Old Testament. You want to have fun with a Jew. You walk up to him and say, what is Isaiah 53 talking about? Isaiah 20, we're talking, it's from your Bible. And if you look at a Jewish Bible, most modern Jewish Bibles, on the right-hand side they'll have it in Hebrew, on the left-hand side they'll have it in English. And the whole Old Testament is in their Bible. All right? You walk into a Jewish temple, up in the front, you'll see a small box. It usually either has a curtain across it or a set of doors that get open. And when you open up those doors, you're going to see 3 scrolls in them, every one of them. All right? And I listed them there so you would know what 3 scriptures are up there. But I'm going to go through it real quick. They have the Torah, which is the first 5 books. That comes out every Sabbath, and that's what's read. All right? They also have another book, okay, called the Tanakh. Now, if you just read the Torah, if all you read was, let's say, and let me get specific, okay? Let's talk about Abraham for a minute, okay? Abraham's father believed in multiple gods. Abraham was the first man we know of in the Bible who believed in a single God. And there's a story in it that Abraham takes all of his father's idols and smashes them all but the biggest one. When his father said, how did these get smashed? He denies doing it. Now, an elder rabbi, 1,400 years ago, wrote a little story about that. What he did was he broke them all and said, see that? The big one crushed all the little ones. They're not important. He's trying to make a point. You only need one God. Now, that story, why that happened, was in the Tanakh. It's not in the Bible. All right? So there's a whole bunch of other things, or writings, if you want to consider them to be, that Jewish people will look at to try to understand the Old Testament. All right? And that's all it's for. It's to help them understand. And I'll give you another example, okay? The Bible calls out 2 very specific commandments. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Also calls out another commandment, thou shalt not kill. I have a question for you, gentlemen. Can a doctor work on the Sabbath? His job is to save lives. If he doesn't save a life, if he allows it to die, has he committed a sin? Of the 758 laws in the Tanakh, one of them says a doctor can, because he's saving a life. So it's a clarification of 2 laws that appear to be in conflict. And they were well thought out, all of these laws, by the way. But my point to you is that they don't read past Deuteronomy. Psalms? No, they don't know what Psalms are. They really don't. They might know 3 or 4 of the Psalms, but they don't know the book of Psalms. They don't know Ecclesiastes. They didn't even know the Songs of Solomon. How about Malachi, Isaiah, Jeremiah? They very, very rarely read it. And normally when it's done is when the rabbis try to make a point out of those first 5 books. He'll read what another what one of the prophets had to say about it. But they don't normally read it. In fact, I'm going to say something else too. I know too many people that have a Holy Bible in their house, and all it is a dust collector. They don't read it. All right? What good is it to have it and not read it? So I challenge any Jewish person, you go ahead and read that book. You'd be surprised what's in there. Anyhow, getting on with this thing, all right? Because I really don't want to waste a lot of time here. I mentioned that. Marty over here loves to start with the book of Genesis, and I think personally, the next book that we go through should be the book of Genesis. The book itself, it's what, 50 chapters long, 55 chapters long, and I made a notation here because I want you to understand something, okay? I had a timeline that I was going to bring to you, but I also summarized. Chapters 1 through 4 in Genesis have to do with the creation and the fall of man. Chapter 5 has to do with all time from Adam to Noah, and that's where you read all these crazy lineages, okay? Now, in 6 and 7, you read the story of the Great Flood, all right? And then you go to 10 through 11, and that's about Noah's family after the flood in the Tower of Babel. But now here's where it gets interesting. Starting with chapter 12, you hear about this guy called Abraham, who later on became Abraham. From there to the end of Genesis, chapter 50, it's all about Abraham. It's about Abraham and his descendants, Isaac and Jacob. And every time you talk about Jacob, it's always back, I am the grandson of Abraham. My father was Isaac. I'm Jacob. Those lineages are extremely important, okay? I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a Jewish cemetery. Has anybody ever been to a Jewish cemetery? I don't think they have them down here. Up north, they're very common. You can only be buried in a Jewish cemetery under one condition. Two conditions. You have to be a Jew. And they trace ancestry, believe it or not by the father's bloodline. They trace it by the mother's bloodline. Anybody got any idea why? I always know who the mother is. I don't always know who the father is. There are people who conject right now that Abram had an illegitimate son. You know, that guy called Ishmael. Before he had his own son, Isaac. A lot of people think that Ishmael was not Abraham's son. Abraham might have slept with Hagar, but that was not his son. How do you prove it? You know who the mother is. You don't know who, and that's why Jewish people trace it by the mother. The mother's Jewish, the child is Jewish. And if you go into a Jewish cemetery, besides being Jewish, you'll see one other thing. You'll see rocks on top of all the gravestones. If you ever watch the end of the movie Schindler's List, you'll see rocks on there. You know what that's all about? Why is there rocks on tombstones? It says, may I drive the person's love deeper into my heart.
Wow. That's wow.
It's usually the children of the person, but it can be the grandchild that puts rocks up there. The last time I went to my mother and father-in-law's cemetery plots, I couldn't even see the gravestones that were covered with roses from their kids and their grandkids. It's a beautiful thing when you understand it. It's a tradition, okay? Nobody has to do it, but that's how they feel. It's that bloodline to them that's so critical and so important. Now, the reason I bring up that is everybody here, if you look at the book of Genesis, you know about the creation account, you know about the great flood, but how much do you guys know about Abraham? I'm stupid. I'll ask questions all night long. I doubt if you know a lot about him. So I'm going to try to point out some of the facts, but I really want to get into Melchizedek, because that's what this is really all about. Abraham was the first person that we know of who claimed to have a single God. So much so that he left his mom and dad. By the way, there's a little story about him before that. He goes from the city of Ur up to Haran, I think it's pronounced. He travels 600 miles with his mom and dad. Not a youngster when he does this. He's about 25 years old. He has his own family, let's put it that way. All right? And he's up there, and he has this vision from God. I want you to leave. Where am I going? Don't worry, I'll lead you. All right? I'm doing this real quick. He travels another 600 miles. Goes all the way down to Egypt and then back up to Palestine. All right? I want you guys to think about traveling by foot 1,200 miles on a vision. Did any of you here do that? Think about that for a minute. And it wasn't just him going. It was his whole entourage. And if you read what the Bible scholars say, it was probably 400 to 500 people that he had to move. That's a lot of provisions taken all of them people. Think about this. All right? I'm just trying to point something out to you, and he did it because of what God told him to do. How many of you here would do that? That's my challenge to you. Think about that. Oh, by the way, I don't want answers, but you think about it. Because when we get into the story of Melchizedek, you're going to find out another thing that he did. Anyhow, and the big thing I want you to understand is that, again, if I were to say, if you look at the Bible, you know the creation account, you know about the great flood, the next major thing you probably know about is Moses. But between that great flood and Moses is this guy Abraham. And most of you don't know anything about him. All right? And I'm saying, that's why I said I think we should do Genesis next. Okay, I agree with Warren. It's the beginning, and without those fundamentals, you miss so much, it's pathetic. All right? In his life, Abraham had a couple of things done to him, and one of those things is the Abrahamic covenant. Okay? It's what God promised Abraham, you will be the seed of many nations. All right? You think about that. It was on that promise and that promise alone that Abraham did everything that he did. At the time he did, by the way, he changed Abram's name to Abraham, and he changed Sarai to Sarah. Right? There was a little mini miracle in there too, by the way. Anybody know how old Abraham was when he fathered his son, Isaac? I know you know. How old do you think he was? He was 100. How old was his wife? 90. Everybody knew she was barren. She knew she was barren. And what kind of a miracle happens? A barren woman gives birth to a child. She laughed at her. Here I am suckling a child. You think about these things. You talk about miracles. I mean, I don't understand that one at all. My wife went through menopause 25, 30 years ago. And here's a woman who was 90 bearing a child. Anybody that couldn't think that was a miracle of God and therefore would be the one God chose, not Ishmael. Ishmael probably occurred when Abram was about 70 and his wife was about 60. All right? But Hagar, she was a young chick. She was about 30. Not unusual. Anyhow, I just want to get on to this. All right? Actually, what I got to make another note to you also. The term has been used in here. I know Marty's used it and I'll use it. I'm an apologist. A nice fancy word to say, I don't believe anything that anybody tells me. I have to understand it myself, and I've got to be able to verify it in that book. I sit in the back there. I take notes. If you watch me in church on Sunday morning, I take notes. Just because Jordan says something doesn't mean it's right. And if there's anything he says that I'm not sure, I write it down, and I will confirm it. I haven't found him wrong yet. I want you to understand that. But that's just me. Right. All right? It's easy for me to say anything to you. I just mentioned a whole bunch of facts to you. I'll challenge you to go read it. You don't have to believe me. All right? And I wonder sometimes how many people do that. What I do, I try to do a lot of study and research in anything that I go to. And there are books besides the Bible that sometimes are more convenient to use than to use the Bible. But if the question about what do I believe, that's what I believe. That's the authoritative word of God, all right, in my mind. Anyhow, let's get on to this thing about who was Melchizedek. Melchizedek is a funny person. He appears in the book of Genesis. Now, I wrote the whole quote down, but I also highlighted a couple of things that I want you to see here. First of all, in the 14th chapter, the 13th verse, a man who had escaped had come to report this to Abraham, the Hebrew. Anybody know why I highlighted that?
Because Abraham's involved.
Huh?
The Hebrew.
First time the word Hebrew was used in the Bible. Which brings me to another question. Do you understand that there's a difference between the word Hebrew, Jew, and Israelite? They're not the same thing, folks. And if you think they are, you're very, 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 very wrong. They're three distinctly different things. I don't know if I put a footnote in here or not about that. I think I did. Let me just look here. Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't. I'll tell you what, next week I'll bring it with me. They are three distinctly different words. Hebrew is a bloodline, all right? Israelite is a term that doesn't appear in the Bible till the 12 tribes come along, after Moses, all right? It's important that you understand that, all right? And a Jew, that's the one that gets me the most. Jew means anybody from Judea. You think that only Hebrew people lived in Judea? What about the Philistines? What about the Amorites? What about the Amalekites? Today, we have the names for them. The Bedouins, the Arabs. They have a claim to the name Jew. They come from a land called Judea. All right? It wasn't until later on that we started to associate the name or the word Jew to Judaism. But they are three distinctly different words, and if you confuse them, God help you. They're not the same. All right? They have to be taken when they're being used. If I go to a Jewish temple, that means one thing. But to say I'm a Jew, and by the way, I am a Jew. I am circumcised. I met the requirement. I believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. How about that? When I walk into a temple, I'm usually met by one of the elders, and I look at him, and I don't want to tell you what I tell him. He said to me, when was the last time you were in yeshiva? I said, about 40 years ago. I said, do you want me to do a baroque at Toy, Illinois? And he knew, and he said, no, I'm happy, goodbye. Because he doesn't know it either.
Right on.
All right? I mean, just take that the way you want to. All right? The ones I find most difficult to talk to. And in Judaism, there's three major denominations: conservative, Orthodox, and Reform. You also have the ultra Reform. You don't want to mess with the ultra Reform. That's Lubavitch and Hasidim. They're the guys that wear collars down the side of their thing. Those guys are unbelievable because they won't even think about reading anything that isn't from Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And I can tell you a story, but I'm not going to do it right now, about how the head of the Hasidim was humiliated by the Rabbi Raymond Cohen. And it's why Raymond Cohen left the Hasidim and became an ordained Baptist minister. I will tell you this. He was in a Hasidim. He was a rabbi in a Hasidim. And as such, he had 600 families assigned to him. One of his person came to him and said, tell me what Isaiah 53 means. Ray didn't know the answer. He called up the chief rabbi. He took on the phone and says, I want to know what Isaiah 53 is so I can tell this clown. 30 seconds of silence and he hears a click on the phone. Ray worked in New York City. 3 blocks from the head rabbi's office. He walks over there. It's one of these offices that had the frosted windows. He could see 2 bodies in there. He says to the secretary, I got to talk to the head rabbi. He's not here. Who's in there? He's not in there. He opens the door up and he's there. And he says, why didn't you answer my question? And the rabbi says to him, get out of here. Believe it or not, at that point, Ray went home and he read Isaiah 53. Suffering servant child. Ray said, I couldn't believe it. So he went through all of his textbooks to try to find out. And he had no answer. Goes back to the guy and says, why do you ask me this? He gives him a tract from the American Board of Missions to the Jews, the same group that baptized my wife. Within 6 months' time, he had enrolled in theological seminary. Graduated from Union Theological Seminary, was an ordained Baptist minister within 6 months of that. Well, you would talk about a Jew that's on fire for the Lord. Again, anyhow, let's get back to this. That Hebrew is extremely important that we understand. That's the start of this bloodline, okay? And that becomes very, very critical. Now, if you go down, you'll notice I have some stuff highlighted in yellow. I don't think we want to take the time to read it. You can read it at your own time. Oh, one other thing. The incident of what occurs here. Abram had found out that his nephew, Lot, had been captured by a bunch of kings. On the second page is a map there. These kings came down on the east side of the Dead Sea and captured Lot. And they actually went around this what they call the Salt Sea, which is north, and went up to Dan with his son, with his nephew. Now, Abram is in a town called Mamre. He leaves with 317 soldiers to go up against an army of 4 kings. He travels 115 miles. 317 men are going to take on an army that was estimated to be 40,000. You talk about a pair of nuts. And guess what? He got Lot back. He got back not only Lot, but all of Lot's possessions. How many of you here, if you have nephews, would travel by foot 115 miles to save your nephews? And if you don't happen to have nephews, how many of you would go save your uncle? Think about this. Think about, I hate to say it because it sounds so gross, the nuts that Abram had to do that. Was he leading 317 men to their death? But guess what? He did. I can't argue with the facts the Bible tells us. All right? You just think about that. That's what it meant to him. He trusted God. He said, I'm going to go up there, I'm going to get these guys back. It was on his return trip that the rest of it comes up. Okay? And I'm going to read the 2 verses read there that are important. Then Melchizedek, king of Solomon, brought out bread and wine. He was the high priest of God Most High. And he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth. And praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies to your hands. Then Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. Now there's 2 very interesting things that occurred there. First of all, Melchizedek. Who and what was Melchizedek? He was a king of a city called Salem. Now, most theologians will tell you that's Jerusalem. All right? There's information behind here to explain that to you. But what's really interesting about him is his name. And I also put down information about that. If you go to page 3, you're going to find that out. So his name itself is Melchizedek. Okay? It's 2 separate words. Melch in Hebrew means king, and Zek in Hebrew means righteousness. So here's Melchizedek, the king of righteousness. Interesting. And the place that he controls is Salem, which is a word for peace. And I'm going to quote it now. He is the king of righteousness whose kingdom is the kingdom of peace. That name is very important. Like most names in the Bible, they have meaning to them. All right? And the reason I'm pointing that out to you is because if you don't make that connection, then this whole story might mean anything to you. Here is the King of peace, of the kingdom of righteousness, and he says to Abraham, "Blessed art you." But then something really astounding happens. Abram gave him a tenth of everything he has, a tithe. I'm sorry, guys, but if you know anything about Jewish law, Jews will tell you that the concept of the tithe came from Moses. Here's Abraham, well before Moses, offering a tenth of everything he has. Shocking, isn't it? I mean, to me, it's absolutely shocking. If you think that the tithe that you give to the church is because Moses told us to do it, here's a man, a righteous man, Abraham, giving to the king, the high priest, a tenth of what he has. By the way, there's another name in here, okay, that's kind of interesting. It's the king of Sodom. That whole area in there, if you look at that map, was actually considered Sodom. It's part of the old land of Sodom. There was a king over that whole area, all right? And he had stopped him, okay? As he was returning from defeating this king that was the leader of the four kings who were bad, and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out and met him in the valley of Shavem. Okay, that is the king's valley. That's the valley that Jerusalem is in, by the way. All right? And the king of Sodom said, "Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself." And Abram's response to the king was, "Now, I swore an oath I wasn't going to do that. All I want and all I will give you, okay, I will take nothing from you, and the only thing I want is food for my men and what they got." He didn't want a damn penny. He wasn't interested in money. Let's put it that way. I think at that particular point, Abram was just happy. I got my son, my nephew, out of trouble. And by the way, it's before this that you started to understand the relationship between Abram and Lot. Lot was almost like a son to Abram. All right? And that's why one of the reasons Abram went up 100 miles to free this kid. Okay. And again, I'm trying not to get into too much and too elaborate on this. Okay. But I want you to understand who and what he was. In the book of Genesis, and I put this mainly on this additional information, is a whole bunch of lineages given. Melchizedek has no lineage. In fact, in the Bible, he's got no beginning and no end. And some people, when they first read this, thought that the Melchizedek, was that Christ back then? No. The people understood that he was a man. He was not a god. Just because the author didn't write down who his parents were and when he died, like he does with everyone else. You go look at the story of Abraham. It tells you when he was born, when he died. It gives you all of that information, okay? Adam and Eve, their lineage is given to you. Shem's, all of them. They're all there. This is the only one that isn't. And some people at first, when they read that, thought that he was God, or a former God, Melchizedek. No, he was a human being. He was a prototype of what was to come. I'm going to explain to you what I mean by that. In Hebrews, Christ is compared to Melchizedek. When we get to Hebrews, it'll all make some sense to you. But right here, right now, all I want you to understand is that he was very, very much a human being. He was king, all right? But he was a gracious king. He was a king who was righteous. In fact, I've read some articles that said he was probably just as, and they used the term improperly, but probably just as wise as Solomon, who everybody would say is the wisest man ever to live. All right? I'm just trying to say he was a man. He was not a god. In fact, there's a term for it, I think it's called theophy, or something like that. Doesn't really matter, all right? When I wrote these notes, the next place I went to was Hebrews. Now, there is a portion in Psalms, but the portion in Psalms, which I think is on the last page, next to the last page, is really just a reference back to him. Okay? I think it's on page 7. It could be
So,
page 7.
we're on page 4, you
Yeah.
got a list at the top.
No,
On page 7 is the entire Psalm, okay?
110.
And I highlighted there where Melchizedek is written out. Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Back in those days, people lived according to orders in society. You had 12 tribes. Within that tribe, there was always one ruler who ran that tribe. And by the way, there were really 12 tribes. Let's get that straightened out. So there's really 13. But the one tribe that had no land were the Levites. And Aaron was a Levite. They were Levitical priests. They were given no land, but they did have, I'm going to call them temples in 48 cities in the area that we know today as Israel. All right? And their purpose was to offer up sacrifices to the Lord God in these 48 cities. But they owned nothing. The tithe that you gave to the church was meant to support them. And just so you know, again, I know you haven't done any outside study on this, but the typical temple back then used half of what they were given. And what they were usually given was food supplies. They would use it to feed the priests that were there. The rest of the food went to the poor and the needy. They wouldn't waste it, all right? So that's where that 10% tithe went to, all right? But the Levites didn't have land. The other 12 did. And some people will argue it was really only 11, because 2 of the tribes we know were actually offspring of Joseph. Joseph stayed in Egypt. He let his 2 sons come back. So there's controversy about that, but there was 12 tribes, okay? They were the ones that owned the physical land and possessed the land, and the land that they possessed was based upon the size of the tribe. The bigger tribes had the bigger land, the smaller tribes had the smaller amount of land. I can give you a map if you want to see what I'm talking about. And believe me, it was all divided up. It was, and all the tribes agreed it was fairly divided, by the way. You didn't have a small tribe like Dan saying, how come I don't have more room? And I've read numbers that said Dan only had about 22,000 people, where Manasseh had 114,000. Now those numbers are all speculative, okay? They don't know for sure. Nobody wrote down and burned the census to say there was this many people in this area. But it was basically a fair discussion. So we got this guy called Melchizedek. And what I really think is interesting about Melchizedek is, again, he's a prototype. Now, if you skip over and you get into Hebrews, okay, this name comes up in 3 different chapters, 5, 6, and 7. And I didn't really bother to highlight it all. But in every place that his name is used, it says, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. That's important that you understand that. It's the order. They talk about the order of the Knights Templar. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. But people were in what they call specific orders. They had rankings, okay? So to say somebody is the order of Melchizedek, what they were saying, he was like that person. That's extremely important that we understand that. They're like that person. They were not that person. They were like them. And when Jews looked at Melchizedek, the very first thing they saw was that their founder, Abraham, paid him homage. Now, for Abraham to do that, it meant Abraham had to see him as above him. You got to understand what's going on there back in that battle. He's just come back victorious. He's brought back a lot. You would think everybody would praise him. What does Abram do? He stops and he offers a tenth of what he has to Melchizedek. Think about that. In the book of Hebrews, the author is comparing Christ to somebody who is of the order of Melchizedek. And they make a very clear distinction too. Christ's realm is not an earthly realm like Melchizedek's was. It's a heavenly realm. That's really what all the rest of this is saying in the book of Hebrews. Christ is not of an earthly realm. He's of a heavenly realm. Okay? He is the Prince of Peace, the Prince of Righteousness, forever. He doesn't have a limit like Melchizedek does. He is unlimited. He's the one that sits at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. He's the one who's up in heaven, who decides the quick and the dead. He's our defense counsel. Every defense counsel will have, man, you never lose with him. Think about this. The analogy that they're trying to make here is, who was this person? He was a model, okay? And Abram recognized him as a model. Later on, that model became flesh and dwelt amongst us. And he did something that Melchizedek didn't do. It doesn't talk about Melchizedek's birth or his death. But we do know Christ rose from the dead. Think about this, guys. It plays on your mind. As a Hebrew Christian, when they read this, trust me, they see this and say, oh my God. They know the Old Testament, okay? They've heard the story of Melchizedek because of where it's in. It's in Genesis. If you don't think they do, you talk to them. They've heard it. They hear it once a year, guaranteed. And if they're 30 or 40 years old, they've heard it 30 or 40 times. And they think about that. That's why it's all important. It's not rubbish, and it is related. But to try to put it into the perspective of why it's important, that's another thing. I've heard people also say that the book of Hebrews was primarily written for Hebrew Christians, not the Gentile Christians. If you were, as the disciples were, and the early church was almost exclusively Jewish. It didn't become Gentile until Paul went out and started to do his work. The city of Jerusalem, at the time of the death of Christ, was estimated to have 50,000 people. Within 3 years of the death of Christ, half of them were Hebrew Christians. Statistics, guy. Think about that. You talk about a religion spreading quickly. Half of the population got to read the book of Hebrews. Think about that. Think about the impact it had on them. This guy who seems completely obscure, who the hell is Melchizedek? To them, becomes extremely important. All right? And I propose to you, he's important to us too, because of the model that he set, that Christ fulfilled. If there had been no Melchizedek, I don't know if it ever would have been brought up in the New Testament. The fact that Abram paid homage to him said he was important, all by itself. In fact, more important than Abram. And Jewish people saw it to write it down in the Bible. So if you look at things from a priority order, if Jews want to claim descendancy from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who was Abraham looking at? Think about that. All these things into play with one another. The character himself, okay, We don't know much about him except he was the King of peace and he was the King of righteousness. That's all we know. When you think about Christ, what do you think of?
Yeah.
Think about it. Is he not the King of peace? Is he not the King of righteousness? You can start to see the parallels to it. I believe that's the reason it's in the Bible. There's one other thing, I gotta share this with you. When Michael asked me to do this, I started to realize God has everything planned out. I have a hard time planning for tomorrow. Alright? I cannot believe that 8,000 years ago when God created, he planned this all out. He even planned me to lead tonight. Take that for whatever it's worth. He planned back when this occurred, which is about 2500 BC, for this to occur. Knowing that a Christ was going to come along later on. Knowing that in January 2020, Paul's going to stand up in front of a group of people and talk about it. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody else, somewhere else, today or tomorrow, talks about the exact same thing. Somewhere. All right? It's really almost scary to me how well he plans things. Anyhow, I don't know what more you want to talk about with this. What I know is what I feel about it. I will point out another thing. The names that are in the Bible are extremely important. It's when you understand things like what does Melchizedek really mean. All right? If you ever have questions like that, do yourself a favor, go look them up. I've read stories that Jerusalem, the word Jeru, in certain Arabic dialects means new. New Salem, New Shalom, New Jerusalem, if you would prefer. All right? There's also some people that say, no, the Salem that occurs here is not the New Salem, not what we know as the city of Jerusalem. And they say that based upon the fact there's other places in the book of Chronicles where God said the city of Jerusalem would be in a different location. But when you read where the location is, it's in that same valley. So that's why I said a lot of scholars say it is Jerusalem. Now, was it 4 miles away? I don't know. I don't care either, to be honest with you, okay? I personally believe it is Jerusalem, but that's me, all right? I don't think anybody can prove it or anybody can disprove it. Just like some of the statements I've made to you, I cannot prove. I cannot prove that Melchizedek had no mom and dad. I can't prove that he did or didn't die. All I know is there's no record of it. But the people of the time saw him as a human being. And he never claimed to be divine, by the way. Christ, he said, my kingdom isn't of this world. He claimed divinity. All right? So, I'm going to tell you, what you got to really do is you got to really read through it all. The other thing is, why is he in Psalm 110? You guys have any idea what Psalm 110 is talking about, that whole psalm? Actually, it should give it away to you if you read the very first verse. Sit at my right hand. It's a psalm talking about the coming of the Mashiach, the Messiah. He's chosen. The whole thing. Until I make your enemies a footstool under your feet. And if you don't think that that's going to happen at the Battle of Armageddon, that Christ is going to be victorious, you guys got a lot to learn, man. That's a done deal. All right? Just as surely as I said, I believe, roughly 8,000 years ago, God said, I'm going to lead this thing tonight. All right? You take that any way you want. All right? But this whole psalm is really a psalm of the coming of the Messiah. All right? Everything in it. All right? And he will be of the order of Melchizedek. Now, I've said, I could keep on talking, but I'm not going to talk. I want you guys to talk. I want to know what kind of questions do you have. Well, you got more, you gotta have something. I know this.
I think what you
See,
said-
he knows it all, that's the problem.
you know, I mean, there's people who could probably differ or agree as far as whether or not was he Christ or not, or was he God in the flesh or not. But I mean, what you're saying makes sense. You know, I mean, but you know, God does appear, and if you continue to read it, in the Old Testament, you'll find out that God does appear. God actually sits with Abraham and has a meal with Abraham along with two other angels.
Mhm.
Abraham recognized
Yes.
who that person was. Now the question is how did Abraham recognize that person? You know, and could that person that he recognized been Melchizedek at the time? And so, which you know, again, the scriptures doesn't say it. So you can take wild theories. You can't.
Yes.
You're just sitting there, and people. I always tell again, people try to put God in a box and try to distinguish everything.
Right.
And so that's where people get and I love to I would like to show something else soon, but but God appears to Abraham in the flesh. God appears to Jacob in the flesh,
Right.
and actually has a battle with him all night long. You know, there's other places outside of Genesis where God appears, in the flesh. So I mean, does God come in the form of man before Jesus? Yes. And so could Melchizedek be that?
That's the question.
That again, there's no answer to it. So
That's why I said I wouldn't know.
the point. Your point is well taken, because he was the king. Now the question is if he was a man, then his lineage, if you want to be truthful, came from 3 sons. Because Noah had 3 sons,
Right.
and so.
We all did.
Yeah, I mean, we all. Yeah, I mean, when you really sit down and think about it, yes, we're the sons of Abraham, of Adam, but we're also the sons of Noah, because everything was destroyed.
That's one of the things I was going to bring up. In fact, I've got that some of my information.
So I mean, the thing is that his lineage, if you want to, if he was truly a man, which is your argument's very good. Is that hey, and possibly so. The neat thing about it is, and the reason why I don't think it's worth a discussion or even an argument on it, is because of one is how he recognizes who God is. Because as you read it, it says he is the God who's the possessor of both heaven and earth.
Right.
And plus, and he says God's the one that won the battle for you. It wasn't Abraham.
That's right.
So,
I'm
sorry.
You're 100% right. It's a good point to stress that God did win that battle.
So I mean, he points out real quick to Abraham, what's doing. Now the 10th is really unique, because like you said, I mean, the 10th was not a law anywhere, but I think it's kind of cool in a sense to recognize that Abraham realized that even though he acquired all his possessions back, he, and I think I was talking to Michael about this in the parking lot. He didn't want any of it. As King of Solomon, or one of the kings was going, hey, I don't want it.
Just be my guy. Call it a day.
Right. He didn't want it. The thing is that Abraham love for God was to realize that everything he had belonged to God. And so him giving a 10% back to Melchizedek was his way of, if it was a man, that's fine. Or if it was God, that's fine. It was his way to respond back to that God had delivered his, is that he went back out and he gave, and I think that's something that we miss a lot about tithing, because we some of us, including myself at times, we get in a habit, I like the ability and I'm an electronic person. I love the ability that, hey, every time my check comes out, automatically there's money that is taken from my checking account and it goes straight as my tithe. You know, now, you know, and the question, and that's nice. But then there's times I think to myself, says, that becomes such a ritual. Or you know, it's something, you know, something like that. Do I really even consider saying, hey, God, thank you so much every time I pay, every time that tithe is given? Because sometimes it happens so much behind the scenes, it's almost like a bill. And I don't want my tithes to be a bill.
Right on.
You know, because it's not. You know, and I give to a lot of different organizations and stuff like that. But, you know, still, I don't want those offerings and I don't want those tithes to be seen as a bill being paid. Because, you know, I love being able to give. And I thank God that I can give. But then at the same time, I think it's important to recognize that when you're giving, you're really, I mean, and especially when you're actually giving, you know, like Abraham did, you're really releasing. So it's not so much like a bill. And sometimes that's why, in my own mind, I keep arguing with myself. Should I put the money in? Should I go ahead and put the money in a little box instead of electronic? I mean, I love all electronics. I mean, it's a battle with myself. But you know, that's the reason why it's a battle, because I don't want my offerings, my tithes to ever be a bill payment. You know, and although it acts like that, it's something that I really enjoy doing, because I recognize, and I think that's where we need to be able to see. You know, it says in Corinthians, God loves a cheerful giver. Because when you're a cheerful giver, your only reason why you're a cheerful giver is because of you recognizing where those gifts are really truly coming from, and that's what happened with Abram. Is that he recognized?
That's right. He recognized. In fact, you know, talking about the tithe, the other night I was reading about the widow and her widow's mite. She gave everything she had. She didn't give 10%. She gave everything.
Empty the pocket, man.
She walked out of that place not even able to feed her own son. But she trusted God to do it. Think about that. I mean, to me, the tithe, the concept of tithe, I'm going to say something. You guys might get it. It's the minimum. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. There are times when I know we've given more than the tithe. And you know what? I don't worry about it. I can tell you as a fact, every time we've given more, I've gotten back. I cannot outgive God. If I try to, I wind up richer. You just got to take that the way it is. That's a fact for my life. All right? And I know for some people it's a hard thing to do. My grandson was complaining. He said, I don't know how I'm going to pay all those bills. I said, Josh, don't sweat the small stuff. Everything will get taken care of. Now, he's been with me, what, about 6 weeks now? And the other day he came to me, I can't believe it. I got this check from out of the clear blue. I looked at him and I said, I told you not to worry about it.
I don't know what financial peace teaches and stuff like that, but one of the things I've taught kids, and I've taught my kids and stuff like that, although I don't know if they do it or not, is that we have to learn to live on 80%.
Amen.
And you put 10% to God, you at least start that way, and then put 10% in savings.
Right on.
And then you live off at 80%. And I don't know how financial peace does it. I've never taken those classes and stuff like that. But it's worthwhile to recognize that everything we have belongs to God. And when you really begin to fully believe that and recognize that, whether it's a car or, you know, whether it's a house, I mean, you know, I've been around different places. I've seen where other people live, and you know, and even some of the homes that, you know, that we think are decapitated in America are still better than what in other places. But the thing is that we need to get away from Americanism economics, and we need to get back to God economics, and realize that no matter what we have, how poor we are or how rich we are according to American standards, it all belongs to God.
But it is a blessing.
And it's a
All
blessing.
of it.
It's a blessing, and it's a gift, and it's a responsibility.
It is.
Well, I always think of it as that we're stewards of what belongs to God.
Right.
So what type of steward are we going to be? That's our choice.
I mean, you sit here and you say, why was I born in America? Because I've asked that question to myself a lot of times, especially when I've gone to Kenya and Haiti and some of these other countries. I said, God, why did you let me be born in America? and stuff like that. And that was the answer I get back from God, is that you're a steward of what I've given you. Are you using it to do what I need it to be done? Because you don't need my money, you know. But he allows me to be a manager, a steward
Right.
of those resources, and to use those resources to glorify Him. You know, and guess what? There's people who live in Haiti and Kenya and they still give tithes. You know, they may be living in a mud hut. Their tithes may be agriculture or maybe animals or whatever, but they're giving. You know, but we get tied up with, was it 10% of my net or 10% of my gross? You know, and we want to sit there and we want to argue that stuff with God, and it's like God says, you know. So again, I want to go back to answering questions about Melchizedek, but that's the neat thing I like about Melchizedek, is that he gave willingly. He recognized, you know,